Do you keep messing up your relationships and end up kicking yourself for doing the same things yet again? Maybe you get too clingy or become jealous, even accuse your partner of cheating. If any of this resonates for you, stay right here because in this video, I am going to share 5 powerful steps that you can start today that will help to transform these behaviors and build the kind of relationship that you've always longed for. In order to bring this to life, I'm going to tell you a story about a woman who we're going to call Zoe. Now, Zoe is not a real person. She's the product of my imagination. But the themes in Zoe's story are similar to the themes that I've heard over and over again in 15 years of therapy practice. So as you listen to Zoe's story, you may find aspects of your own experiences reflected within it. Zoe is struggling in her relationship with Zach, her partner of 3 years. They're both in their early 30s, they met online, and initially when Zoe met, she found him calm and stable and reassuring. Zach is very goal-orientated, he's put a lot of effort into his career and he's been very successful. Initially, Zoe felt very safe and cared for by him, but increasingly she finds herself anxious and concerned that she's too much for him. She craves a lot of emotional support and physical closeness, which Zach sometimes finds overwhelming, causing him to pull away from her, which of course only increases Zoe's anxiety and desire to connect with him. When she's at work, Zoe finds it difficult to focus because she's preoccupied with her anxiety about Zach. She bombards him with text messages, seeking reassurance, but then becomes even more anxious when he doesn't respond. She starts to entertain the idea that he could be with someone else or enjoying the time away from her. And so she becomes jealous and suspicious, and sometimes even accuses him of cheating on her. When this happens, Zach remains very calm but somewhat cold, telling Zoe that she really needs to grow up and develop some emotional maturity. Zoe feels silly. She's quick to apologize and promise to do better, but her anxiety about the relationship is growing and she's terrified of losing Zach and never being able to meet anyone new. If Zoe wants to transform this situation, step 1 might be to understand the roots of her behavior. Zoe might recall being 9 years old when her mother discovered that her father had been having an affair with another woman at work for many, many years. The result of this discovery was that Zoe's father left home and Zoe rarely saw him. This meant Zoe was constantly longing for her father, wishing that he would return. Her mother was overwhelmed with the new responsibilities of being a single mother, had to take on additional work, and Zoe didn't want to burden her, but inside her she had a deep longing for connection and emotional support, especially from her father. Zoe's life history reflects the themes in her relationship with Zach. Her concern that someone she loves and cares about might have secrets and will one day disappear from her life. Her sense of being too needy and overwhelming for other people. Her fear that she'll never have the love and the connection that she craves. Step 2 might be to take care of her inner child. Zoe beats herself up for being too needy, but in reality, her needs are simply the core needs that any child would have. Zoe can recognize with a sense of self-compassion what little Zoe went through to lose her father and to know that this loss, this abandonment was of his choosing. And then also to experience her mother's distress and challenges in being as emotionally available to Zoe during such a painful time in her life. Zoe's inner child needs comfort, attention, and affection. And she also needs to know that there's a stable, safe, reliable adult who will be there for her. And this is the relationship that Zoe needs to nurture with herself. I'd like to suggest 2 ways that Zoe could do this. The first is by how she talks to herself to begin to develop a soothing, comforting, validating voice within herself. She might also find it helpful to focus on building some friendships that are characterized by support and care so that she's not completely reliant on just one person for emotional support. The most important aspect of this is that Zoe isn't denying her needs or criticizing herself for having them. She's acknowledging them, she's giving them attention, she's taking them seriously, and she's really giving herself the message that she will tend and care for herself as best she can. And the second thing I'd suggest to Zoe is to nurture a little more self-reliance, to show herself that she can be the stable and consistent, reliable adult in her own life. And that may mean focusing a little more on her own life goals, considering her career goals, maybe even getting some coaching or mentoring at work. This could help her feel more capable and competent and be a little less overwhelmed by her desire for someone else to care for her. Step 3 is to understand the intention and the motivation behind the problematic behaviors. Zoe knows that frequent texting and suspiciousness and accusing Zach of cheating and threatening to leave don't help her relationship, and yet she finds herself drawn into doing them again and again, almost against her will. It's very important to recognize the intention behind these behaviors. The actions that sabotage relationships are not usually the reactions of a secure and autonomous adult. Rather, they can be seen as the actions of a fearful child who's terrified of abandonment. In moments of fear and desperation, a little child may act in ways designed to get their caregiver's attention. They might be naughty, they might shout, they might say something provocative, they might do something that annoys their caregiver, because that gets their caregiver's attention and reassures them of their caregiver's presence. A little bit like repeatedly texting Zach asking for reassurance, or scrutinizing his behavior, or accusing him of cheating, or threatening to leave. The needs that drive these behaviors are completely valid, even if the behaviors themselves likely get in the way of meeting those needs. So we could recognize that her frequent texting is driven by her anxiety. It's designed to get Zach's attention and reassure her that he's still there. However, what it actually does is it irritates him and causes him to withdraw. She can recognize that her jealousy and her suspiciousness and her accusing Zach of cheating stem from her anxiety, her fear that someone she trusts and relies on could actually be doing things behind her back that she has no idea about, and that those things will ultimately lead to them suddenly disappearing from her life. Her suspiciousness, her jealousy may be trying to protect her from that kind of betrayal. But of course, the effect is likely to cause Zach to become frustrated and angry, defensive, or maybe even a bit secretive because he feels so scrutinized. So we can recognize that these are parts of herself that are trying very hard to meet her needs. Her anxiety wants to keep Zach close, wants to reassure her that he isn't going anywhere. Her suspiciousness is trying to protect her from being betrayed. However, whilst the intention of these parts is to meet her needs, the effect is quite the opposite. It's important that Zoe doesn't shame herself for having these parts, doesn't criticize them for being there, but thanks them for what they're trying to do and asks them to take a back seat, because the healthy adult Zoe needs to come forward. Zoe can start to ask herself, how might this healthy adult within me take charge? What can she do to meet the needs of little Zoe and to help her build the kind of relationships that she needs in order to thrive? Step 4, experiment with behavior change. Now that Zoe has identified the behaviors that are causing problems in her relationship, and she understands the needs that underlie those behaviors, she can start to change them and see what happens. When she has the urge to text Zach to get reassurance, she needs to refocus her attention on her own work, becoming more capable, more competent, more self-reliant. But to do that, she also needs to acknowledge the underlying feeling, to care for herself, to have emotional support and concern. One way to do that would be to gently and kindly acknowledge the underlying anxiety. Adult Zoe can have a conversation with little Zoe that goes something like, yes, of course, you're afraid of losing Zach. This is a really special relationship. And you lost your special relationship with your dad because he suddenly disappeared from your life. Of course, you have that longing for connection and that fear of losing it. But Zach's at work right now, and his work is really important to him. That doesn't mean that you're not also important to him. So let's practice delaying and waiting and seeing Zach later. And then we get to have a pleasant interaction with him rather than him being annoyed because we've been texting him all day. Zoe can learn to let Zach come to her rather than always being the person who goes to Zach. Now, of course, that's not to say that Zoe should never ask for emotional support from her partner, but she may want to practice doing this more from the position of her healthy adult who's a good advocate for her emotional needs, rather than from the position of an overwhelmed, anxious child. Zoe could actually get much more direct with asking for her needs to be met. She can ask Zach when might be a good time to talk to him about things. She could let him know when she might like practical advice and when maybe she just wants to vent or even have a hug. By being a better advocate for herself, she'll almost certainly reduce the conflict in her relationship, and she'll get the opportunity to find out just how supportive a partner Zach might be. There are many ways that Zoe could experiment with changing her behaviors. What happens if, when she feels suspicious and she starts wondering where Zach is, she practices distracting herself, giving herself the time to turn her attention to something else that interests her rather than focusing on him? What happens when he gets home if, rather than demanding to know where he's been and what he's been doing, she just greets him warmly and asks him how he is? Step 5, observe the reactions of other people. Whatever happens, Zoe is going to benefit from changing her behaviors. She'll benefit from a warmer, more supportive relationship with herself. She'll benefit from feeling more capable and competent. But what I cannot guarantee is how Zach will respond. He is his own person with his own pattern in this relationship. As Zoe pursues him less, will he withdraw less? Will he reach out to her more? As she pursues her career goals and her ambitions, will he support her, champion her, encourage her? As she makes more adult requests for emotional support, will he be able to respond warmly and with interest in her? And that's why I would advise Zoe to change her behaviors repeatedly, to give Zach many opportunities to show how he's going to respond, and that she also tries to do this in other relationships too, perhaps with friends or with work colleagues, so she gets to see how many people respond to her changes in behavior. But what if Zach repeatedly responds to Zoe with coldness? What if her requests for emotional support are always greeted with contempt or withdrawal? What if his reaction to her pursuing her own career aspirations is to be critical or to look down on her because they're different from his? This may be devastating, but it is not a failure of the task. It's actually valuable information, and it puts Zoe in the driving seat to be able to make a wise decision about the future of this relationship. If you want to try this out for yourself, check out the description or the pinned comment for a free worksheet that you can download to put this into action. Now, as you've probably realized, Zoe is not the only person in this relationship, so what might be going on with Zach? If you want to know, check out this video next.